All right, and well, we'd like to now introduce a Member of Parliament for Homabay Town, Honorable Peter Kalumah. Good morning and thank you for joining us. First of all, congratulations are in order for winning the nominations.
Thank you, Mike. It was a bloody massacre.
Yeah, members of Parliament were not having it easy.
Interesting way to describe that.
Tell you, if you look at what happened in central Kenya, Rift Valley, and most of Nyanza, it is lucky to survive.
And I think you also survived with a whisker. At some point, I think there was
no, not to me. 92% of the votes cast in the nominations were cast in my favor.
All right, that means then
the people of Homabay Town constituency.
That means
you're
there's a very
confident that come
big
the
job
elections,
ahead of you.
I'm one leg and half body in.
Which then keeps you in a better placed position then to discuss the story that we just ran. And this is an indication of the high cost of living in the country has risen very high. And yesterday we had members of Parliament meeting and trying to figure out the situation and how they can ease this situation for Kenyans. Your thoughts, first of all, on how that parliamentary sitting went?
No, yesterday, of course, we were coming from recess. We are in on our last leg up to elections. You remember, under the old constitution, we had a situation where Parliament would be dissolved at a time like this. Currently, under the new constitution, of course, Parliament will be sitting up to 8th of August, so that the current Parliament will be walking out as the new Parliament will be walking in on 9th. That is the tricky situation where we are. The nominations are going to affect, parliamentary business in a very fundamental way, going by what I saw yesterday. So many of our members who underwent the massacre I was talking about earlier, of course, for one, are ashamed to come. Others have chosen to take the path of going as independent candidates. And of course, there are still, challenges to interpretations of the law. When you resign from your party to run as an independent candidate, is it that your seat is vacant as the Constitution seems to suggest, or it takes enforcement by a court order? So there is a possibility that those of our members who have resigned may not be coming. But even if they were to be coming, you see the constraint in terms of the psychological trauma, everybody knowing you don't have any chance back. So I want to caution the nation that we are going to try to do our best, those of us who survived. But we seek the understanding of the nation in a very deep way, because those constitutional bills like the two-third gender rule principle that require large numbers are going to be affected. For bills that require mere 50 members quorum, we could transact them. And maybe it is also an opportunity for me to request those of us of goodwill to learn that we have another 3 months during which we have a lot to do. Now, coming to food crisis, we are thinking about it in short term. But of course, there are long-term solutions to it, which, as the leadership of the nation, hoping we will have, the opportunity to come back to Parliament, we must begin thinking about. You see, in the short term, Mike, you can think of, how to reduce prices, how to, subsidize, production around. But in the long term, my suggestion would be we must begin thinking of how best to support devolution. You cannot deal with food production if you don't improve the sector, dealing with agriculture. And I can tell you we are in a situation in our budgeting processes in National Assembly in particular, where very little money is going, to the counties to deal with agricultural production. And we have so much still going to, the Ministry of Agriculture. Yet this function is largely devolved. So you have counties that can maximize agricultural production are not even able to purchase a tractor. Fertilizers are still being imported by the national government. And when they come, you saw what happened in the last season. It's a poor quality, fertilizer, which is not enabling, our maize to grow and others. Now, that is what we need to deal with in the long term. Let us, farm up devolution, give more resources there, and secure better accountability down.
Okay.
But in the short term,
yes,
I want to say that there is something that I saw the NASA, coalition talking about that we need to begin thinking about very seriously. Mike, we must avoid a situation where the leaders of the nation, whether they are in Parliament, whether they are at the topmost, trade in these critical services. Because if you see the issues of maize, the issues of sugar, the issues of milk and others, who are involved in these industries, there are near monopolies over them. And I can tell the people of Kenya, it is never in the interest of a business person to reduce prices. It is in the interest of a business person to increase margin. So I think going forward, we must suggest, and this includes everybody in elective leadership don't engage in business, particularly where that business is being engaged in with the state.
And that probably would still speak to a long-term plan, because currently there are those who are involved. But as a member of parliament, there was a decree given by the president that when parliament resumes, which was yesterday, that there's going to be an effort, a deliberate effort to bring the prices down. You're sitting in parliament. Do you see this as a practical thing to be done? Kenyans are out there expecting prices to come down. There's a long-term, yes, but short-term. People want to be able to afford just price of unga.
And they want
Is that
to know
possible?
when they will be able to afford it, not 3 months from now. When can I walk in tomorrow and buy my unga for 50, 60 shillings?
It is a very unfair burden the president has, decided to impose on parliament. Let me say so. Because, the situation of food prices and cost of living is not about lack of laws, which is the, primary mandate of parliament. Let me tell you. The other day, the NASA principal was talking about, rent restrictions and rent controls. Mike, do you know we have Rent Restrictions Act in our country? We are not just enforcing it. And we have a Rent Restrictions Act complete with a Rent Restrictions Tribunal to ensure that, the constitutional provisions that all Kenyans are entitled to some affordable housing are in place. Do you know it is this Jubilee administration that decided to impose rent not rent, but tax on rental income. And you noted what the landlords did. When you impose a tax burden of 18%, 30%,
and you also raise
the
the
landlords just decided we will continue getting what we are getting. We impose that increasing amount of so that I'm saying in terms of policy, we can reduce rent. We have more money left in the pockets of the tenants, to purchase property. We have laws to deal with monopolies. Why do we have a situation where we can count on our fingers the people importing maize? And by the way, is it in their interest that we produce maize locally? Because they are importing, they want them to go. So that I'm saying what we are talking about is in the short term. But in the long term, it is not the burden of members of parliament, to solve cost of living crisis.
The laws are already there.
The laws are there. What we need is enforcement of law. We have laws against monopolies and oligopolies. But you have situations where these critical sectors are enjoying monopolies, and it is just normal for law enforcement agencies. These are the things we need to deal with. You may be in a situation, if we are not careful, where sugar is already imported, milk is already imported, powder or whatever, and of course, maize is already imported, and Parliament is being told, allocate money by way of additional budget. What are you doing to those businessmen?
Right.
One instant pay at the high cost, and of course, you are doing nothing in terms of how you are going to sustain agricultural production going forward. What I wanted to say is that the law enforcement agencies, do not need to consider whether it is Kalumah trading in maize or importing sugar. Let them go in and avoid these monopolies and control prices under our
Right, so that is still long term. In the short term, even as we wind up, Kenyans now want to know, as a parliamentarian, having that debate yesterday, what is Parliament planning to do in the short term to reduce these prices, and how much longer do Kenyans have to wait before that is effected?
I agree with you. In terms of seeking law enforcement, it is an institutional process, it's long term. What we are being pushed to do now is to set apart money to import maize, import sugar, see a way of controlling prices. And I imagine there are suggestions that we could be entering into arrangements. I don't know how members of parliament can do that, but with the people in charge of this industry, so that the prices can go down. But I can tell you prices are very high. I was buying a packet of milk at 80 shillings yesterday, and you can imagine the difficulty that it is. So it's at the level of leadership. I think beyond the idea that we can set apart money to secure that things like maize are there in good supply for our people, we must see a way of engaging at the level of leadership, not as members of parliament, the people in these businesses, so that we can negotiate and see how these prices
all right, and maybe because of time, how do you see Parliament affected by virtue of the fact that, first of all, quorum is already a challenge. It was a challenge yesterday and is likely to be, just like you've mentioned, there are those who did not get nominated, and there is the legal aspect of it. And moving forward, the two-third gender bill has a deadline, which has got a consequence which follows it if not met. How do you see that playing out?
We crave the understanding of all Kenyans. Let me say, I'm one person who has stood very firm about, the two-third gender rule enforcement, law, whether it comes by way of constitutional amendment or by legislation. If we were to find a way of modeling it around, an amendment to a mere act of parliament, then we will need, the bare quorum of some 50 members. It can work. But you see, the focus of, the gender activists is that it is better secured in a constitution. Now, if you seek to secure it in a constitution, then you know the numbers. I can tell the people of Kenya that in that context, we will have a limitation. Remember, Mike, it is not just, those of us who are not lucky to go through the nomination process, but even for us who are lucky to, be, nominated, the campaigns are on. There is a new move sweeping the country called the independent movement. And so many of them, parties are beginning to compete. The independents are already, churning, their machinery on the ground. There is going to be quorum. That is why I was going to say that, for those legal interventions or legislative interventions that require, mere basic minimums, let those of us who are in parliament and who are still focused, step in and push that legislative agenda. For those that require big numbers, let the people of Kenya, understand that we find ourselves in this situation not because of our not wanting to pass this law. And by the way, let me say that that constitutional, that High Court decision was very progressive, but because of the situation in which we find ourselves in. So my prayer would be that, to those, well-meaning people of Kenya who would want to go to a court of law, to dissolve parliament.
All right.
But please save us, going home before 8th of August.
All right. Thank you very much, Honorable Peter Kalumah, Member of Parliament for Homabay. And campaigns begin on the 28th officially of May. So we wish you all the best even as we move forward. And, that's where we'll wind up that particular debate. But do stay with us right here on KTN News. When we come back, we've got the newsroom.
Of course, and we'll be delving into the issue of presidential debates. And remember, that is the basis of our question of the day. We're asking you, will the presidential debates change your choice of a presidential candidate? Will the presidential debates change your choice of presidential candidate? We'll be reading out your views after this short break.
And maybe just to throw it out there, the question would be, how many presidential candidates do you know right now? Normally, there are only 2 or 3, but this time we have a record number. And to Kenyans out there, how many do you actually know?
Actually, yeah, so you should be telling us on our Twitter page as well. Morning Express KTN is the hashtag. Let's take that break now.